Hello, beautiful people! My name is Varstahl. And if you're asking yourself, what the heck is Ace Combat 7? I've got the answer for you. Before we begin, I believe it's important to be completely honest. And when it comes to Ace Combat, I am hugely biased. So, let me explain.
Cum historia mutat valdera scris revelati sum primum Deus es cum potentia sua demon fundet mortem in terram Dei demoritur surget iterum.
In order to understand the setting where Ace Combat 7 takes place, I'll briefly summarize the history of the continent. If you don't want to know or want to avoid the minor spoilers for the previous games, feel free to skip ahead to 14 minutes and 9 seconds. Okay, here we go. Usean and Uctobania experienced large economic and military growth since the 80s, while at the same time they increased their nuclear armaments. The two nations become superpowers and treat each other as rivals. They improve their intercontinental ballistic missile technology and deploy a range of satellites and ICBM interception tactics. Uctobania develops nuclear-armed submarines, while Usean builds an orbital weapons platform capable of destroying missile silos. Since the strategic orbital linear gun would be ineffective against submarines and launch missiles, Usean conceptualizes a maneuverable orbiting spacecraft, armed with lasers, which could change orbit fast to counter incoming attacks. Eventually, the Cold War ends before the spacecraft could be built. In the wake of the Cold War military expansion, the economic recession caused civil unrest after the Belkan Federal Law Review. The Belkan government allows a portion of its eastern territories to secede: Gebet, Rekta and Ratio. Ustio declares its independence from Belka on May 12th. Unbeknownst to Belka, Usean maneuvered in the dark and is one of major causes of Belka's economic recession, and forced Belka's hands in selling those eastern territories to begin with. In October, an asteroid with a diameter of 1.6 kilometers is discovered. By December, the study of its trajectory indicates that Ulysses would collide with Earth in July 1999, with Usean and Dania predicted to suffer most of the damages. With the discovery of new resources in the Republic of Ustio, the Principality of Belka starts a full-scale invasion on March 25th. Rapidly losing their territories to Belka, Ustio hires mercenaries and starts an alliance with Usean, Sapien and Uctobania. The allied forces invade Belka with no regard for human lives, carpet-bombing civilian targets. The Belkans, in an attempt to stop the allied forces, detonate a number of nuclear weapons on their own soil. Despite that, the alliance keeps pushing on, until the fall of Belka's government. The interim government placed in its stead issues a ceasefire and signs a treaty with the allied countries, losing most of Belka's resource-rich territories. Resenting the military campaigns, pilots and soldiers from all the 5 countries form a terrorist organization, a world with no boundaries, with the aim of destroying the concept of borders and creating a unified world. After several skirmishes and battles, the group plans are folded, and the group itself dismantled. Skully Island's government is overthrown by terrorist forces. The Federation of Central Usean response is fast. They hire a mercenary group to bolster their military ranks, quell the terrorist threat, and return the islands to the Federation. Preparations for the incoming asteroid impact spread across the land. Usean creates an array of railgun cannons, Stone Age, planned to stop Ulysses in its tracks. On Emmeria-Estovakia attempts to create the Chandelier, a huge railgun able to fire capsules containing several cruise missiles. Emmeria evacuates the areas in danger, and develops a series of underground shelters in its capital, Gresmeria. Fearful of being caught in the middle and falling prey to military aggressions between the Usean Federation and the Union of Uctobanian Republics, the nations of the Usean continent unite to form a superpower alliance of their own, the Usean Allied Forces. Usean southern countries decide to contact the Usean Federation instead of joining the Allied forces, with ensuing tensions between northern, western and southern countries. Despite the protests, Usean formally extends a military pact to the leaders of the southern nations. Outraged by this treaty, extremists across the Usean continent stage a coup on the day of the signing, on May 30th. They attack all the countries at once with intent to prevent Austria slipping in Usean territory and to dismantle any Usean alliance. Taken aback by the sudden coordinated defections, the Allied forces retreat, planning counterattacks. After 16 months of fighting, the rebel forces are defeated, and the conflict ends on September 18, 1998. As predicted, on July 3rd, Ulysses passes through Earth's rush limit, shattering in fragments due to Earth's tidal force. On July 8th, the fragments start colliding, with most of them falling in the next 2 weeks. Usual Stonehenge destroys a large number of them, while Estovakia's chandelier is not ready, thus resulting in massive losses. Estimates report 500,000 deaths and at least 1 million refugees. Damages and refugee crisis cost deeply to both Usean and Estovakia, and the instability that follows the disaster keeps the planet restless. In an effort to vaporize remaining Ulysses fragments in Earth's atmosphere before they can pose a threat, Austria, with Yuktobani's assistance, develops the maneuverable orbit spacecraft which was theorized during the Cold War. The Arkbird is a low-orbiting spacecraft equipped with laser weaponry for upward shooting. After Ulysses hit, on the Estovakian front, with Emmerian humanitarian aid campaigns and a number of NGOs, the government struggles to keep control, and numerous armed factions are born. The most prominent is the LUF, Lies United Front, named after its leader, General Lies. The Usean Treaty Organization, or UTO, an intergovernmental entity founded after the discovery of the asteroid, launches an initiative to address the refugee crisis. Every Usean nation has to accept and shelter a quota of the refugees. The Federal Republic of Erusia begrudgingly agrees. In April 2000, Erusia stopped issuing visas to foreigners and blocks all refugees at the border, claiming they are asked to shelter an excessive number of foreigners. Useans start boycotting Erusian products, and the UTO placed tariffs on Erusia's export, exacerbating the precarious state of the Erusian economy. On August 22, 2003, Erusia invades the neighboring San Salvacion and seizes control of the Stonehenge facility, taking the UTO personnel operating the facility into custody. The Federation of Central Usia, the main force behind the creation and construction of Stonehenge, issues an ultimatum to the Erusian forces, asking their complete withdrawal from Stonehenge and San Salvacion by September 14th. Erusia has no intention to retreat, so the Federation of Central Usia disbands the Usean Treaty Organization and reforms it into the Independent States Allied Forces. On the day of the ultimatum, the ISAF launches an unsuccessful air raid on Stonehenge because the Erusians converted the facility into an anti-aircraft weapon. Erusia begins pushing ISAF eastward, winning numerous battles and inflicting heavy casualties. By 2004, ISAF General Headquarters evacuates from mainland Usia to North Point. ISAF manages to intercept a bombing run meant to hit its general headquarters in North Point, and with a few strategic raids prevents an island invasion by Erusian forces. Despite the aerial superiority provided to Erusia by Stonehenge, ISAF keeps retaking lost territories, finally destroying the Stonehenge facility in July 2005. With the Erusian forces retreating, ISAF sieges their capital, Farbanti, which falls on September 19th. Shortly after, a number of young radical Erusian officers take control of Megalith, a missile launch facility built in secret since early 2000s, and plan to target some of the remaining Ulysses fragments to make them rain across all of Usia. ISAF is able to destroy the Megalith, putting an end to the war. After the destruction of the Megalith, ISAF occupies Erusia and assists the provisional Erusian government in their effort to stabilize the country. A number of officers resenting ISAF's involvement found a new militia, Free Erusia, proclaiming the new government is illegitimate and vowing to push out ISAF from Erusia. ISAF cuts off their supply lines and destroys the Free Erusian main headquarters, ending the uprising. With the resistance suppressed, the new Erusian government is successfully established, and ISAF withdraws from Erusia. In 2008, the new government reinstates the monarchy, placing the royal family Lies in charge. By April 2007, the Lies United Front controls the western Estovakia, including its former capital, and is the de facto ruler of the whole country. The LUF decides to halt humanitarian aids meant for cities under control of opposing factions, causing a humanitarian crisis that will lead to the death of over 200,000 civilians. Following the Gledina humanitarian crisis, the Eastern faction declares war on the LUF. The conflict soon expands to other factions. The Island Coalition and the Independent Tariff Federation join the LUF, while the Eastern faction assimilates the Northern Islands armies. With a full-scale civil war raging on, in 2010 Emmeria discontinues the humanitarian relief assistance. After years of turmoil, in 2013 the Eastern faction wins the war against the LUF, causing it to disband. Despite the victory, Estovakia's economy is annihilated, unemployment's rampant, and Estovakia witnesses the rise of secessionists and insurgencies. With the civil war at an end, the generals, military officials that were leading the Eastern faction, take the helm of the new government, and Emmeria provides humanitarian aid support once again. In 2007, the Democratic Federation of Wellow is selected to host the G7 Summit, a multinational meeting of several countries including the Ocean Federation, the Union of Yuktobanian Republics, the Republic of Ania, the Federation of Central Asia, Verusa, the Nordlands and the Federal Republic of Verusia. The summit is cancelled after a terrorist attack in a nearby area, and in 2008, the Ocean Federation hosts it on board of the Arkbird. The meeting makes history, ratifying several anti-proliferation treaties including arms reduction and nuclear test ban, known in its ensemble as the Arkbird Declaration. Between 1995 and 2010, a faction of Belkan supremacists, named Grey Men, plots to reignite tensions between Usean and Yuktobania, in reprisal for the defeat in the Belkan War. Through political and military power, they acquire strategic facilities in the Belka-Oja border and insert sleeper agents in the Ocean and Yuktobanian military ranks. The chain of events put in motion by the Grey Men is unknown, but they caused Yuktobania to send over Ocean territory an SR-71 reconnaissance aircraft on September 24th and a spy vessel on September 27th. Oja deploys a squadron of fighters stationed at Sand Island Air Force Base and shoots down all the aggressors in the following days. On September 27th, after the last engagement, Yuktobania issues a formal declaration of war on Oja, beginning with an air raid against Sand Island. Yuktobania brings its nuclear-armed submarines to the fold, while Oja decides to deploy the Arkbird into battle by attaching laser modules for orbital strikes. On October 27th, Ocean President Vincent Harling and Yuktobanian Prime Minister Seryoja Viktorovich Nikanor try to hold peace talks for a ceasefire. They head for a neutral country but never meet. Harling disappears and a coup in Yuktobania replaces Nikanor. After countering several attacks, Oja decides to launch a full-scale invasion of Yuktobania, aiming to capture the capital city, Sinigrad. After months of fighting, Ocean forces find Harling and Nikanor and breaks them out of prison. The two leaders try to broadcast a message of peace to both countries, but the Ocean Vice President and the Yuktobanian fleet commander suppress it, branding them as traitors. On December 30th, the Ocean forces manage to decrypt secret intel with the plans put in place against the two countries. While the combined military forces of Ocean and Yuktobania put a stop to the threat, Harling and Nikanor hold a peace talk in Ohrid, ending the war. By mid-2010s, Usean's infrastructure still hasn't recovered from the Ulysses impacts, and Ocean President Vincent Harling proposes to create a huge structure capable of massively harnessing solar power which could be distributed across the Usean continent. Usean welcomes the initiative and the construction begins. Emmeria's continuous humanitarian relief caused negative sentiments in Estovakians, who see the indiscriminate support as aids to the Luft remnants. The situation drags on until August 30, 2015, when the generals declare war on Emmeria. They shortly conquest the capital Grezmeria, forcing Emmerians to retreat, and by November, Estovakian forces push Emmerians' army as far back as Kesed Island. Estovakia sees the opportunity for a swift end of the war, and on November 24th sends large bomber squadrons to bomb the Vitosa airspace and Emmeria's army stationed in Campania airport. The assault fails and marks the beginning of Emmeria's counteroffensive. In the following months, Emmeria keeps regaining territories and pushing Estovakian forces back, so much so that the Estovakian army concocts the Scorched Earth policy, a plan involving the deployment of several weapons of mass destruction into Grezmeria. On March 31st, the Emmerian military began the liberation of Grezmeria and the neutralization of the weapons of mass destruction. That same night, after the liberation, a number of cruise missiles approached the city, together with Estovakian squadrons. The next day, Emmerians raid Son Island, the estimated point of origin of the cruise missile launches, where they find the now completed chandelier and destroy it. As a result of the war, a coup d'etat removes the generals from power, and the new Estovakian government, together with Emmeria, sign a ceasefire agreement, ending the war and re-establishing peaceful relations between the two nations. This menu will be incredibly familiar to anyone who ever played any ace combat whatsoever. And after all, if it's not broken, don't fix it. But let's cut to the chase and go straight to the gameplay. I'll go in free play in easy because I don't believe my ability is to play and talk at the same time. Classical ace combat briefing menu. The interesting part that is quite new to the series is the aircraft tree. You don't unlock anymore all the upgrades just by playing. And there is this huge tree of upgrades to unlock and aircraft to unlock and sub-weapons to unlock, both for single player and down here for multiplayer. Playing the game in either single player or multiplayer grants you a certain amount of cash that allows you to buy upgrades and weapons to use both in single player and multiplayer, unless they are locked to one of the two modes, like this one for example. The aircraft selection is also very familiar, with the exception for the customization of aircraft parts. There is the new ability to modify and customize your aircraft to better suit your needs. There are a number of different upgrades for body parts, usually increasing your speed, mobility and other base defense, the arms upgrades that improve your weapons, and a few miscellaneous upgrades. On top of the graphics being really excellent, the gameplay is very smooth. I was honestly quite surprised to see how well this game translates to PC. This game is pretty much everything I ever wanted from its combat on PC. Well, except for the fact that this isn't Ace Combat 5 The Unsung War. But all jokes aside, Ace Combat 7 for me is one of the best Ace Combats so far. It's not without its issues though. For starters, the campaign has gone back to being strictly linear. I'm one of the people who really liked multi-pronged attacks that could shape the campaign in different ways, at least in some of the previous games. And another one of the things that I didn't quite like is the destruction type of map. Let me show you one. In this type of missions you have a range of targets over a large area, and as you can see on the top left of the screen, a time limit and a points target. This type of mission generally involves a lot of waiting. The bad part of this type of missions is that whatever happens, you still have to wait the entirety of the timer to go down. And more than just a handful of times, you can find lacking yourself 30 points and having wasted the entirety of the mission. It happened to me a few times too many, to be honest. The staples of the game series though are all still here. Night missions, surprise attacks, fly under a certain altitude, fly in a tight canyon, ace pilots to down, unique skins to unlock, survive against unsurmountable odds. There's really nothing much I'm lacking, except giving orders to my wingman, that is. I'm even having quite a blast with multiplayer, to be honest, despite the little number of maps and the only 2 game modes available. Battle Royale, which is essentially a free-for-all, and Team Deathmatch. If you're a fan of the series, I really can't do anything less than highly recommend this game. And if you're not, this is a pretty good time to pick it up. So this is it, folks. Ace Combat 7, available on Steam for $60 or your regional equivalent. My name's been Varstahl, and I'll see you next time.